us. And look, we've been talking a lot about Lions injuries. We've been talking a lot about NFL injuries because it is that time. And speaking of that time, it is our time to catch up with our guy, Dr. Jeff Pierce from the Michigan Sports and Spine Center. Dr. Pierce, you do house calls, huh? Here at Feldman Chevrolet?
Yeah, Feldman's my friends for years. We grew up together, so I'm familiar with all their – well, they've grown so big, I don't know if I know all their facilities anymore. I'm like, you were at 3. How'd you get to like 18 or whatever?
18.
Yeah, they're crushing it.
No doubt about that. But, Doc, we're in that season right now. Local X, Twitter, whatever you call it, broke the other evening. The Lions had their night practices. Jahmyr Gibbs went down. Terrion Arnold went down. Ennis Rakestraw went down. The Gibbs thing that they're talking about, the hamstring situation, Dan Campbell talked to the media today, did an interview with the flagship station. I didn't get a lot of concern in his voice, but I guess what I'm asking you, Doc, is for a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, shifty, explosive, this hamstring thing, make me feel better about this. I guess you're basically the therapy guy, right? Like you're a doc, but you become a therapy doc. When you're shifty, you're explosive.
We like to say sports medicine doc.
Sports medicine doc. Yeah, well, you're making us all feel better right now. The hamstring thing, if they say something along the lines of we're probably going to keep him out the rest of the preseason, bring him back for the season, how much does that concern you? Should we be concerned? And again, you're not privy to the reports. Let me put that out there for everybody. In your experience, your impression of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look back, he had a hamstring injury last year, correct?
Correct.
So I'd like to know if that's a re-injury of that. Overall, sitting him down, no, I have no problem with that. That's just playing caution, kind of what we do preseason. There's no reason to push right now. There's no reason to push it to understand the anatomy. Everybody knows where the hamstring is, right?
Correct.
So it's underneath there, and it attaches. How it attaches, it's from your knee to your buttocks. There's a bone. There's bones there that the muscle attaches to, and there's a lot of muscle there. So when we say hamstring, it's a pretty general term. There's multiple muscles that are in there, multiple ligaments and things like that, and it's a different degree. So with what we're saying is that it is very important. The hamstring is very important for a player like himself, like Gibbs is. So I think we're going to go on the very favorable. We're being cautious on purpose to get him ready for the season because this doesn't matter. The guy's proven himself. He's an NFL great. I mean, he did great last year. He's going to do better this year. This is another one of those things I'd like to say. We're going to learn. We're going to tune you up. We're going to understand your anatomy a little bit better, and he's going to be a little bit cautious. So I think he'll be just fine by the time if it's a simple strain. There's different grades, right? We go 1 through 4. He's probably in that 2 to 3 range, and usually those will recover pretty quickly, especially with all the special sauce and all the attention he'll get. And that guy, he's got great work ethic, so he's going to do everything he can to be ready for the season. Will he play with a little discomfort? Like you talk to any NHL or NFL player, I don't know what day I played a game where I didn't have a little discomfort.
No doubt. And talking with Dr. Jeff Pierce of the Michigan Sports and Spine Center, he is our injury insider. Convenient that he is here right now. And they don't seem concerned about the Terrion Arnold thing. Terrion Arnold, though, they have discussed the fact that he probably will be held out the rest of training camp. He'll come into the season. That's more of a football concern, reps, all that kind of stuff. But, Doc, I will say this. For guys like Terrion Arnold and the young guys, is that a new process, learning to deal with playing with an injury? And, D-Mac, I'd be curious to get your opinion on the first time that you got hurt. There's a little bit of a different process for the young guys, I would imagine, mentally. You do talk about the mental side of this a lot. Yeah. Is it different?
Well, it is different. I mean, number one is you got to get through it. I mean, some of these college guys, if they're lucky, have gotten through their college years without any injuries. And some of these big colleges, they have a locker room full of treatment that rivals any professional team. So they're used to that regimen, what they need to do. How smart and how mature they do, I mean, that's another story. I mean, everybody feels they're invincible. I'm an NFL player, drafted high up. Those are the kind of things that go through their head. There is a learning curve. What we're getting at here is there's a major learning curve how to treat your body. Don't take it for granted. go see the trainer after you're coming off the field. You got to be cautious of that. And you start looking at, like, we throw the Brady factor in and all those kind of things. But these guys are seeing that, firsthand, and that's the locker room influence. Campbell's locker room is different. I mean, he is next man up. Everybody's fighting for it. But it's also a team, team effort. It's not like you against me or I'm fighting against you. It's that team thing. So I think the maturity in that locker room should be a little bit more advanced. So your question of what do they have to learn? Yeah, this is their learning curve. This is like you need to be understanding your body. You need to be respectful to your body. We talk about foot and ankles. You're talking about these guys. Are we pushing, the limit? With Campbell's attitude, why are we having all these injuries? What are we doing? They're going full out like it's a game. Is that the right thing to do? I guess hindsight and what we're saying, will they be better prepared or are they going to be more injured, prematurely or, not in the I'm trying to say it politely in case it gets played back to Campbell. I mean, right now, I think we got to play with the maturity. That team seasoned. They got a great medical staff. They know what to do, and these kids just need – you're right. There's a learning curve. I think the learning curve is going to be a lot greater than like when we were doing it 20 years ago because we didn't have the science. We didn't have the longevity. And the game's faster. I mean, the game's moving a lot faster.
People in the chat real quick, and D-Mac, I do want you to weigh in on this, but I do want to get to this from Nicholas Duncan. Just said lingering hammies. You said it last year, the hamstring itself. Discuss. The lingering hammy thing. The level of concern, I guess.
You're concerned, but the thing is, what we do something called musculoskeletal ultrasound, which we can really get a dynamic view of what's going on with that hamstring. There's a lot more science behind it. The thing is the athlete has to learn. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. So you're calling a lingering hamstring. He may feel, look, I played great in the playoffs. I'm fine. What do you do in the offseason to prevent it? That's where my issue would be. And that may not be his fault. He may have strengthened and done everything around it, but possibly didn't address that one issue. And there's, like I said, there's more science. There's the peptides, the PRP, let's just call the biologics. I always refer to it the secret sauce in the locker room. There is stuff to be done, and maybe that's a little bit more of what needs to be done. Because like I said, there's no real injury that's going to put you out. A hamstring, you can wrap a hamstring, majority of the time. Being out 7 weeks, which I forget which player was out 7 weeks, that seems a little excessive, but it's all where that injury happens because it's such a long muscle. If it's closer to the bone, you're a little bit more worried. That's a longer time frame. It's in mid-belly, then you're hopeful that it's a shorter time frame.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of this could be precautionary too, right, Doc? As far as because you mentioned it, if we're talking about Gibbs specifically, is this the same hamstring reoccurring? So they have some history. Like a lot of us as athletes, will hurt something and it won't. Like you'll rehab it, you'll get it to a point, but it's always going to be there. It's like my shoulder, it's right, like stuff like that. It's just how can I get it to the point. And maybe now because of exhibition, because of this is a time where no other time in the season you're going to be able to take this time, like Doc said, focus specifically on more of the medical side to be able to get him ready to prepare. Now, when you go, that's Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been here, who knows himself, self-aware of being through a season and maybe more preparation. Now, the rookies like Rakestraw and Arnold, that's why culture is so important. You look at the culture that they've come from. So big colleges and high-profile colleges that have all this medical equipment, well, then they're already familiar with going into the training room and what it needs. It's just maybe culturally you get on with how it's done in Detroit and everything else. It's all about you figuring out yourself and what you need the best. It's also the team and the doctors. Like,
you got to build that trust.
You got to build that, right? Build that trust, and it doesn't come overnight. But with this injury, hopefully that it's not reoccurring. That's the whole thing we're trying not to do is can we get this where you're not going to hurt it? What's the question, at least in our locker room, that I ask Doc all the time? So, okay, forget what had happened. can I hurt it even more? Is it, or is this, am I just, because if the object, and I'm sure in the NFL too, is that when you're not structurally going to hurt it more or do any more damage to it, it's just dealing with the pain, well then that's easy.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways around it. The other big point is these guys are coming, like the maturity. You're talking about college. At college, they are high profile. But you're going to the NHL. You're at a whole different speed. You're at 25% more, if not 50% more. You talk to any new players, like, God, it's so much faster. Everything's faster. Everything's harder. And sometimes, like these guys, Campbell's pushing them to be harder. You got to slowly understand. You don't go from 0 to 100. And these guys that are in the NFL understand that 0 to 100 of the NFL already. The rookies are like, I'm adjusting, and maybe that's, education, or that's in a boardroom, or, things like that, to understand everything's coming faster, guys. You got to prepare your bodies a little bit better. You got to be stronger. You got to come in. You got to do the plyometrics. I mean, these guys are well-trained athletes. I think one's from Alabama. Are they both from?
Breakstraws from Missouri.
Missouri.
SEC, yeah.
All right, so they're not Alabama, but still they're at high-end places, but it's a different speed. These kids got to know, and that's what preseason's about for the rookies. And, I'm not going to quote Aaron Rodgers, but, he says that's you got to have those reps. You got to understand that the speed's different.
Says the guy in a darkness retreat.
Yeah.
While the rest of the team's out there putting in the work. See, you
Shout
did
out
it.
to
You did
Ayahuasca,
this.
baby.
Let's
You
move
did
on to
this.
JJ. I
Maybe
don't
you
want
gotta
to
get
start
off
with.
that Detroit Tiger smack and get to the ayahuasca.
Yeah. You did this to me.
All right, sorry.
All right.
We'll move to JJ.
Yeah, Dr. Pierce, let's do that too. The meniscus situation.
I'll transition for ours.
The meniscus situation. Oh, real quick too. Art Vandalay asked in the chat. I saw a study on hamstring injuries that came out last year that attributed most of them to a weakness in one of the legs.
That's part of it. I mean, there is that whole kinetic chain, right? So I didn't want to get down to break it down, but I'm glad somebody brought it up. You look for those weaknesses. Like when we did our exit interviews on our players, we look for those weaknesses because they do compensate, they do play, and there is natural atrophy over an injury. And you can look at those balances. So we call that muscle balance. Like you can get guys overpowering in their quadriceps over their hamstrings. So it's usually a 3-to-2 ratio. And some of these guys get real excited about certain types of workouts and they lose their muscle balance, which on younger players, most of these guys are mature, but I've always talked about adolescents. Some of these rookies are still maturing where their ligaments are still catching up. Mm-hmm. You have this overpowering muscle. It's not just necessarily weakness. It could be just muscle balance in itself. And a lot of times, preseason, we're trying to measure that and get them caught up. But natural, like all of us are, we hate working the weak part of our muscles. We love our beauty muscles, these guys. And it'll continue to grow, and then it just perpetuates the problem. So it becomes a rabbit hole. So he's accurate, but I would use the word muscle balance over weakness because there is both strength and weakness on both sides.
Talking to Dr. Jeff Pierce here, and he is our injury insider, and there's tons of injuries to talk about. As a matter of fact, let's change it up. J.J. McCarthy, Michigan darling. Some people still love him. Some people don't because they're Lions fans, and he plays for the Vikings. But the moral of the story is this. They said that he's going under the knife, meniscus issue for J.J. McCarthy. This isn't the ACL. This isn't the reconstruction. I'm asking the difference because when you hear meniscus, anything that ends in "is," like that sounds like it's a big deal. Educate me, Dr. Pierce. This is softer than an ACL. D-Mac said 5-6 weeks. He's seen that in the past as well. We've seen it here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a meniscus. So just understand the anatomy. It's the cushion part of the knee. It's what goes on. A lot of times back in the day, we just remove it and go on. What they're trying to do now, the reports are showing that he's going in and the surgeon doesn't know exactly what he's going to do until he gets in. What that means is depends on what the fragment looks like. If there's enough of that fragment to stitch up, then he'll go ahead and try to save it. The problem is the vascular system for the meniscus is not great. So that's why we used to just cut it off. I always compare it to like fraying of your hair, like split ends of your hair. You want to cut it off so everything else remains healthy. That's kind of the situation that's being teased out. I think everybody's getting a little bit too excited. I was listening to ESPN today. They're like, career end, all this bad luck. I think I'm on Mac's side. If it's a simple scope, these guys can be back up in 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. Is he ready to start? all of a sudden he's the starting quarterback for the Vikings. So I think overall the kid's great. I mean, I've met him personally. I've had time to spend with him. He's a great attitude. Michigan fan or not, or Lions fan or not, the kid's a great kid. He's going to do well anywhere he plays, and he brings a great attitude to the team. And I think that's what Minnesota fell in love with right away. This isn't going to hold him up. It's not going to hold up a change his career or anything. He is a running quarterback. He may learn quicker to be more of a pocket quarterback because of this injury, just for safety purpose. But this shouldn't slow down his mental capacity. I mean, this is like, it sounds like it's going to be a quick scope, clean up what was torn, and then get him back out there. And it would obviously strengthen him up.
Doc, appreciate the time, man. This was a lot of ground to cover here today, man.
Pulling out my education stuff.
Yeah. Sorry. We won't do that again.
I want to goof around, talk about Corvettes or something.
Well, hey, they have some here at Feldman Chevrolet in Novi. They're right here in this showroom. Doc, appreciate the time as always.
Thanks, Doc.
There he is, Dr. Pierce, everybody, from Michigan Sport and Spine Center, breaking it down. So,
attention sports fans, don't miss out on expert sports injury insight with Dr. Jeff Pierce of Michigan Sports and Spine. Join Dr. Pierce every Tuesday during Big D Energy and Thursdays during Ermanni and Edwards, where he offers top-notch injury advice. Trust the guy that I trust. Dr. Jeff Pierce is here to keep you in the game and performing at your best. For more information, visit MichiganSportsAndSpine.com or call 248-426-9944.